challenges that were in front of her, regardless of sometimes what she even thought or she believed, like she was able to unify across districts, across lines, across nations, if you will. But she never got haughty, even with all this quote unquote power. Yeah. Even though she knew that she really had a way to impact and change people's lives in the future. And for me, when I think about what I love to do as a speaker, as a coach, I don't just want to be a motivational speaker. We have a lot of people who motivate, and nothing is wrong with that. Yeah. But I also understand the difference that when you're motivated, the next day you could be unmotivated. Yeah. I want to be more of a transformational, that I transform and bring impact. I impact you to the point that you want to transform. You don't want to be the same. Yeah. And understand that that is a process. Yeah. And I believe she did that. She transformed. She impacted people's lives, and she transformed at the same time. Yeah, that's good. And it seems like it's I'm catching on now more to seeing your theme of unifying in your top 10. The way you describe Hunger Games, that she's there to unify a nation. Pitch Perfect, she comes in and unifies that group of singers. X-Men, that's all about unifying. Even The Matrix, he's coming together and unifying a group of people. Lord of the Rings. So it seems like unity is such a huge thing. And as you talked about the diversity aspect of it a minute ago, is any of that from your background of just, obviously your uncle was a huge unifier of Atlanta, Georgia, and around a vision of what it should be. But is there anything that makes you look back into your history and go, well, that's for me. That was for me because of where I've come from? Well, I can think of a few things. I'll start from one. When I was little, I was always the one organizing and planning. Oh, really? Always. Family events, whatever the case may be. But my daddy used to tell me all the time, when we were children, my twin brother would get in trouble, and I would come and be his, I would always advocate on his behalf. Yeah. So, Daddy, he's not going to do it again, are you? No, he's not. Like, can he get out of timeout, Daddy? Type of thing. So, always trying to bring peace, like the peacekeeper. Yeah. And even when, one of the greatest things when I worked at GTM, which is my brother's company, there was 5 different partners, so different personalities. I see that because I always had different people that I would have to deal with. And even in my position within the company, the creatives are totally different from the account side, and being able to, I was the middle. I was always the middle who could always understand people's perspective and different points of view and figure out a way how we can all work together. And the favorite thing that I worked on the most was the Truth Campaign, which was a national tobacco awareness campaign. So it was being able to help save those lives. It was going to the Vans Warped Tour, which is nothing but punk rock, but being able to relate and correlate to them at their level. Yeah. Being able to pick the right people who could do that. So you have 7 strangers who never met, who are now going to live for 3 months on a bus, traveling the country, saving lives. Wow. So I guess you could say it's always been a theme. It's good. And I see that whole training, testing people, especially under pressure, a lot of this. I wonder at times in looking at your top 10 based on the way you're talking, whether there was some sort of movement between you being the main character to you being almost the mentor character. Like a lot of these characters have that sage mentor trainer, specifically trainer. It's not really even just a wise counsel. It's like somebody who teaches them how to do this. And it sounds like that's your background is a lot, or what you've come into as a person is realizing that you're that also. Yes, I love to teach, Brian. I love to teach. And it's funny because I remember when I lived in California, we lived on a street with a gang, with the Bloods. It was right before the Rodney King riots. Oh, boy. And I was 12 or 13. And the people on the street used to try and protect me. And I used to talk to them, and I used to tell them, well, you ought to stop. And I'm just being honest. Like, you ought to stop selling weed. Like, you're extremely now, I'm a 12 or 13-year-old, right? Talking to them. I was like, but you could go to college and you could do this, you could do that. And some of them actually stopped. So I knew I didn't understand my gift, but I was like, because of that, I was like, I'm going to be a psychologist. Yeah. I got to college, flunked almost every psych class there was. And I wind up falling into psychology of education and excelled. And I didn't realize I was a teacher. And I did my undergrad is in elementary education. And my senior year, I decided not to be a teacher. I didn't take the test. My professors were very upset. Wow. But I knew I didn't want to be in a classroom.
Yeah.
And when I started working at GTM, I was the first employee. And I started to naturally fall in. I started to learn about training, and I realized that I'm still a teacher. I'm still a trainer, just in a larger classroom. I'm not stuck inside of four walls, but really, and I was the trainer for the company. So any training I developed, and everything I learned in elementary education, I was able to apply. Lesson plans. If you could teach and deal with kids, you can teach and deal with adults. Yeah. You know, how do you grab their attention? How do you hold their attention? How do you make sure it's engaging? People learn different ways. So when I have people come under me, I always ask, how do you learn? I don't assume, but that way I will then alter to some degree how I'm training you. Yeah. What are your goals, personal and professional? Because if I care about you and what you're trying to grow and develop, I know you will give 110,000% to the company, because it's not just about the company, but it's about your development and growth as well. And I'll check back in with you. Well, where are we with this on that personal level? Okay, now this is the deadline. How are we tracking? And I've always been that way. I just didn't know it until later. And that's when God started to reveal, wait a minute, Janna, you've always been a coach.
It's who you are. Yeah.
It's who you are. Like, I've always taught. If I understand something, I could teach it to almost anybody. Because then I know how to simplify it. I know how to make it a way that's digestible to them. And it goes back to the organizing and planning. When I see the vision, I'm able to then break it down to simple methods to then help you get unstuck. To help you, okay, this is the first step, then that's, I'm able to then, that teacher, that mentor, that coach, all of that to me is one and the same. Yeah. It's the same with speaking. I'm teaching, I'm coaching you, I'm helping you get from one level to the next.
That's good.
So it's always, it's always been there. And I come from a lineage of teachers. My mother was a teacher. My aunt was a teacher. I couldn't get away from it if I wanted to. It's in the blood.
Yeah. So which one of these characters would you want to teach?
Ooh, which one would I want to teach?
Which one would you want to be your student? So, let's say that you can be one of these mentors, whether it's, Samuel L. Jackson in The Matrix, or let's see, you can be Haymitch, and I guess in the Hunger Games. I don't know. You could be Gandalf. You could be, but let's just, I tell you what, take the character out of it and just say, of all these ones that have the potential of being difference makers, which one would you want to coach?
Wow, that's, Brian, you coming with hard ones today. Okay, this may be a shocker, but Davdas.
Okay.
And the reason why I say that is because sometimes as women, we don't understand the power we have. We forget who we are, what we were created to do, and what we were created for. And with her, she was waiting on somebody to complete her for all those years. Her love was out there. So instead of understanding who she was, and I understand in times there's culture as well. And I'm not saying I profess to understand the total Indian culture, but I do understand that there are hierarchies, there are places that women have, and there are certain things that are expected and not expected. I also know that it's really big of women empowerment over there now, especially with all the issues that they deal with. They get married at a young age. They're betrothed at like 12. They're little girls being married in some cases, depending on the village. And a lot of them are trying to start their own business, so trying to find ways to get there. So when I think about who probably had the most challenge, or who I would, and I don't know if I would even be able to change it, to be honest, but just to empower them to say, look at all the possibilities, look at what you could truly do for your community, look what you can do for other women that are coming along, that are under you. It would be the woman in the brothel as well as the other woman.
Oh, wow.
Like, who are you and your value, your worth, your self-worth, you're worth more than this. And I know at times it feels like we're not. At times it might be we're only worth what we can give or what we can get, that exchange. In some cases we've been made to feel that way. Like, you're only worth this because I said so. And maybe it was a person in authority speaking into your life saying you're only worth this. Sometimes adults and parents don't realize the strength they have in their words and what they speak over their children or into other children. And sometimes it's harmless. Sometimes it's out of anger and bitterness and other things. But, we have to be careful what we say. But to both those women, I will make them or in hopes to have them understand and realize their worth, their self-worth, that they're worth more than being a prostitute, that they're worth more than being the fact of just waiting on somebody or just somebody's wife. Yes, that's part of who you are. Because I'm a wife, I'm a mom. We carry many hats. But you're more than that, because before you were that, you were God's daughter. Before you were that, you were whatever the name was that you were called and created.
That's good.
So who are you?
Yeah.
And I know a lot of times people struggle with identity and not understanding their value, their worth, and who they truly are. But when you start to understand, first, you're a child of the Most High God, and you start to understand who He calls you to be, then you truly understand who you are and your power and your capability. So we'll be both the women in Davdas.
That's good. That's good. And it sounds like you're kind of calling, especially the women, in I would imagine in your top 10 to be that chosen one, just as much as Neo or the men in your top 10. Probably the women to see that they are just worth and have the worth and have the capability, and are just as much a destined warrior as the men in your top 10.
Just as powerful, because God can use anybody.
That's good. So if I were to pick a bad guy out of your top 10, it seems like, based on our conversation, that expectation is somehow the bad guy. Does that make sense? That the expectation of what people have to either live up to, like the noble people in your top 10 who have to have certain expectations put on them, that they're supposed to be, marry these people or behave in this way. And then there's the expectation of some of the people whose worth is not quite there and don't believe that they're the chosen one, and sort of been placed in expectation that they're not that, What would you say about that? Does that feel like a bad guy to you, like expectations?
But the person doing it is me. It's not necessarily outside. I think a lot of times, as my pastors say, we always say the enemy, and a lot of times that enemy is the inner me.
Yeah.
And where we put our own limitations in ourself. So for me, it was always that self expectation that I wasn't good enough, or that self expectation of I can't do this. It was always negative thoughts that I couldn't live up to this, or I wouldn't be good enough. And even nobody put it within my family, but it was kind of intimidating. Like, your uncle is the mayor of Atlanta. Like, where do I even fit in that? And on my father's side, my grandfather used to work with the Tuskegee Airmen. He was homeless and pulled himself up by his bootstraps and became a self-made millionaire. He was a dentist, living in California, Ladera Heights. My uncle, my granduncle, who just passed, was a judge, the first African American. So I can't get away from it. Yeah. But yet, even if knowing all of that was around me and a part of me, I didn't feel worthy of it. Yeah. And even with God and His love, at times I didn't feel worthy of His love. Like, why would you even choose me? Yeah. And to be honest, I don't know where a lot of this started. Some of it I do. That's for another time. But He had to, as I learned Him, once I got saved and I learned Him, I started to realize, okay, yes, you think I'm worthy. No, I don't have to be perfect. That's not what you're asking for. You're not asking for perfection, because you're perfect. I'm perfect once I'm dead. Yeah. Until then, I'm constantly learning how to be what you created me to be and how to impact others. So, long story short, I know that was kind of a long answer, but it's self. And for a lot of us, it is self. It's our mindset. Yeah. It's the seeds that's been planted that we have watered. Yeah. And that we allowed to grow. We didn't tear them down. And they have choked us and choked our very existence. But that doesn't have to be the case. Yeah. At this very moment, anybody can then say, I am no longer who others or myself have said that I am. I am who God says I am. And I will build from there. And I will change my mindset. I will change my language to reflect what God says I am and who He says I am. He calls us to be conquerors. He calls us more than enough. He calls us to be the head and not the tail. He calls us to be above and not beneath. He has always called us victorious. He never said that we were worthless. He never said that we were failures. But He's always called us at the top of it. He even said we're light upon a hill. That's at the top. But for some reason, we get this mindset that that's not the case.
It's so fascinating to think of your life and and what you're describing now, it's just so fascinating because you're describing this kind of dichotomy between being over the shadow of some really great figures, like being born into that nobility. So having to kind of live up to a legend and feeling, inadequate, or that expectation on top of that, right? And then